My beloved child. Pause here for a moment, because this story carries the kind of emotion that is easy to overlook when the world is moving too fast. There are some names we speak loudly. And there are some names we can only whisper when no one else is listening. In this fictional message of hope and reflection, imagine that last night, in the silence of a room where nobody could see their face, your soulmate whispered your name. Not because they had forgotten you. Not because they were simply remembering the past. But because something inside them finally became too heavy to carry alone. For a long time, they tried to convince themselves that moving forward meant never looking back. They filled their days with distractions. They smiled when people were watching. They answered, "I'm fine," when someone asked how they were doing. They kept themselves busy enough to avoid the silence. Because silence had become dangerous. Whenever everything became quiet, memories of you returned. Your voice. Your laughter. The way you once made ordinary moments feel important. The conversations that lasted longer than either of you expected. The little things you probably thought they had forgotten. They remembered more than they ever admitted. And last night, something changed. There was no dramatic announcement. No crowd. No perfect speech. Just one person alone with thoughts they had been running from for far too long. And suddenly, your name escaped their lips. Softly. Almost like a prayer. They sat there afterward, surprised by the sound of it. Because hearing your name in their own voice awakened something they had been trying desperately to bury. They remembered what it felt like when you were still close. They remembered the comfort they once found in knowing you were there. And perhaps most painfully, they remembered all the moments when they could have treated that connection differently. There are certain realizations that arrive too late to feel comfortable. Sometimes we understand someone's value only after their presence is no longer guaranteed. Sometimes pride keeps us silent until silence becomes the very thing that separates us. And sometimes we believe we will always have another opportunity to say what our heart has been trying to say. Until one day, we realize that another opportunity was never promised. Your soulmate began thinking about those moments. The message they almost sent. The apology they almost gave. The truth they almost confessed. The conversation they kept postponing. They wondered how different everything might have been if they had simply been brave enough to speak honestly. And that is when their heart broke open. Not because they suddenly became perfect. Not because every mistake disappeared. But because they could no longer hide from what they felt. They missed you. Not only the idea of you. Not only the attention you gave them. They missed the person you were when nobody else was watching. They missed your kindness. Your patience. The way you listened. The way you cared even when you were tired. They remembered moments when you were trying to understand them while they were struggling to understand themselves. And now those memories felt different. They carried weight. They carried regret. They carried a question your soulmate could not escape. What if I lost someone I was supposed to appreciate while they were still here? That question followed them into the night. And eventually, they stopped fighting it. Their eyes filled with tears. Not the kind meant to gain sympathy. These were private tears. The kind nobody photographs. Nobody posts. Nobody knows about. They were tears born from finally admitting something to themselves. They still cared. Deeply. Perhaps more deeply than they had allowed themselves to understand. And so they whispered your name again. Then, in this imagined moment of spiritual reflection, they looked toward heaven and asked for something they were almost afraid to request. One last chance. Not a guarantee. Not control over your heart. Not permission to erase the consequences of everything that happened. Just one chance to become honest. One chance to say what pride once prevented them from saying. One chance to tell you that losing you taught them something having you never could. They finally understood that love cannot survive forever on assumptions. People need to hear the truth. People need consistency. People need effort. People need to know that they matter. And perhaps there was a time when you needed those things from them. But they were not ready. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were emotionally confused. Maybe they believed vulnerability made them weak. Maybe they thought you would always remain within reach. Whatever the reason, they now understood something important. A loving heart should never have to beg repeatedly to be valued. And somewhere inside them, they knew you had probably grown tired. Tired of wondering. Tired of waiting. Tired of trying to interpret silence. Tired of giving your heart explanations that their actions never confirmed. So they didn't ask heaven to force you back. They asked for the courage to become someone capable of speaking the truth. Because real love is not possession. Real love does not demand. It does not say, "You belong to me." It says, "I finally understand what your heart deserved." And my beloved child, this is where the message becomes about you. You may have spent countless nights wondering why someone could care about you and still remain silent. You may have questioned whether you were difficult to love. You may have replayed conversations, wondering which sentence you should have changed. But another person's inability to communicate does not determine your worth. You were never supposed to spend your entire life proving that you deserved honesty. Love should not require you to disappear inside yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And if someone truly returns to your life, what matters will not simply be the words they bring. Watch the actions. Watch the consistency. Watch whether their behavior has matured alongside their emotions. Because, "I miss you," can be beautiful. But, "I have changed how I treat you," carries much more weight. Your soulmate's imagined prayer last night was not merely about getting you back. It was about becoming ready for the kind of love they once mishandled. They began remembering the times you stayed when leaving would have been easier. They remembered your forgiveness. They remembered how you saw something good inside them even when they struggled to see it themselves. And for the first time, perhaps they understood how exhausting that must have been for you. You carried hope for both of you. You kept believing things could become better. But eventually, your heart needed peace. And choosing peace was not betrayal. Sometimes walking away is the moment we finally stop abandoning ourselves. Your soulmate understands that now. That is why their whispered prayer carried uncertainty. What if they don't want me anymore? The thought frightened them. Because for so long they had imagined that if they ever became ready, you would still be waiting exactly where they left you. But life does not stand still. Neither do hearts. You have been growing. Learning. Healing. Becoming more aware of what you deserve. And whether this person ever returns or not, that growth belongs to you. No one can take it away. Still, somewhere in this fictional story, imagine your soulmate sitting quietly with one final realization. If they were ever given another conversation with you, they would not waste it pretending. They would tell you, "I thought silence would protect me, but it only pushed you away. I thought I had more time. I thought you knew how much you meant to me without me having to say it. I was wrong. You deserved clarity. You deserved effort. You deserved someone who wasn't afraid to show that losing you mattered. And I am sorry it took losing your closeness for me to understand what your love was worth." Perhaps those are words you once wished you could hear. But listen carefully. Your healing cannot depend upon someone finally saying the perfect sentence. Sometimes closure comes from another person. Sometimes it comes from realizing you can continue without receiving every answer. Your future remains valuable either way. If reconciliation belongs in your story, let it be built on honesty rather than desperation. Let it be slow enough to reveal whether real change has happened. Let trust be rebuilt rather than assumed. And if your paths are meant to remain separate, allow the love you once carried to become wisdom rather than a wound you reopen forever. Because some people enter our lives to stay. Others enter our lives to awaken something. Both can matter. Both can change us. And neither experience has to destroy us. Tonight, your soulmate may exist only as a character inside this inspirational story, but the emotion behind it points towards something very real. People sometimes recognize value after distance teaches them what closeness could not. They sometimes find courage after fear has already cost them something precious. And they sometimes discover that the words they were afraid to speak were exactly the words that needed to be spoken. So do not measure your worth by who regrets losing you. Measure your growth by how deeply you have learned to value yourself. You do not need someone's regret to prove that your love mattered. You do not need someone crying behind closed doors to prove that you were unforgettable. Your value existed before their realization. It exists now. And it will exist regardless of what happens next. Still, imagine that quiet room one final time. Your soulmate closes their eyes. Your name rests on their lips. And instead of asking heaven to simply return you to them, they whisper something different. If I ever get another chance to speak to them, help me tell the truth. Help me stop hiding behind pride. Help me become consistent. And if they have already found peace without me, give me enough love to respect that peace. That is different. That is not possession. That is growth. Because sometimes the greatest proof of love is not desperately holding onto someone. Sometimes it is becoming honest enough to admit where you failed them. Sometimes it is changing even when you do not know whether you will receive another chance. And sometimes it is respecting the other person's choice even when that choice hurts. My beloved child, whatever chapter you are living through right now, do not let yesterday convince you that tomorrow has nothing beautiful waiting for you. There is more ahead. More healing. More clarity. More laughter. More moments when your heart will feel light again. You may not know exactly who will be standing beside you when those moments arrive. You don't need to know yet. Keep becoming the person who no longer accepts confusion where honesty should exist. Keep protecting the softness of your heart without allowing that softness to become permission for others to repeatedly hurt you. And keep believing that healthy love will never require you to lose yourself in order to receive it. Somewhere between regret and redemption, between goodbye and another beginning, there is a lesson waiting for every heart. Your soulmate's lesson was learning your value after experiencing your absence. Your lesson may be learning that your value never depended on whether they recognized it. And perhaps that is the most powerful revelation of all. Because when you finally understand that, you stop waiting for someone else to decide whether you are worthy of love. You already know. And from that place, whatever happens next, reconciliation, closure, or an entirely new beginning, you can walk toward it with your heart open, your eyes clear, and your dignity intact. Your story is not finished. And neither is your capacity to love. Sometimes what feels like the final page is only the quiet space before something completely different begins.